I've been tracking all the MrBeast accusations, and while some are worse than others, I think this one is by far the worst. In this video, I'm going to try to prove 2 points. The first is that MrBeast and Feastables is using child labor and forced labor for their chocolates and has been since around late 2023. And the second point is more damning. I believe that since the beginning of Feastables, MrBeast knew that he was going to use child labor and forced labor for his chocolates, but he tried to fool us into thinking otherwise. Let's get honest. Look, I review chairs, home office tech, and gaming stuff. I am not a journalist, although I think in another life I could have been a decent one, and I am not an activist, nor will I pretend to be one. This shirt cost 20 bucks, so it was probably made using some kind of exploitation. All that being said, I think I found some damning stuff about Feastables that I thought you should know. My editor and I took a lot of time to research this, and of course, everything in this video is alleged, and the conclusions are my own opinion. So now that I've made MrBeast lawyers very unhappy, let's first talk about chocolates and child labor.
Have you ever seen the numbers of people that are working in chocolate, that are working in like horrible conditions?
Around 20 years ago, a series of news stories and a documentary found that young children, some of whom had been enslaved or trafficked, were working on cocoa farms that supplied major chocolate companies.
If you walk by a chocolate store, you never say, oh, child labor.
Oh yeah, a lot of kids died for that chocolate you're giving for your...
A lot of little tiny unformed bodies are being forced to dig holes in the ground.
Like many other industries, chocolate is notorious for its exploitation of children using child labor and slave labor. They use child labor, forced labor, unsafe conditions to farm these cacao beans that eventually makes its way to become chocolates at your table. And oftentimes these farmers, they are too poor to ever even eat the chocolate itself. Case in point, Feastables is made in Peru, but guess where it's not sold? Peru.
He has been waiting for a long time to try MrBeast chocolate, but it is not available in his country, Peru. He went straight from the airport to Walmart to get them.
This exploitation is well documented, and brands such as Hershey's and Mars, and perhaps we're going to see Feastables today, are notorious for refusing to eliminate child labor and slave labor from their supply chain of chocolates. With that being said, I'm going to try to prove my first point, that MrBeast is using child labor and slave labor for his chocolates today and has been since late 2023. When Feastables first launched in January of 2022, if you went into their FAQ, their frequently asked questions section, they proudly displayed that they were child labor free and slave labor free. As a matter of fact, in April of 2023, they doubled down and they added to their list of main menu options this option that said we're slave free. And if you clicked it, it had an entire dedicated page talking about how they were free of slave labor and child labor. But just a few months later, in October of 2023, that main page item that said we're slave free, that was removed. In addition, in the frequently asked questions section, that stuff about being child labor free and slave labor free, that stuff also disappeared. Later in May of 2024, and even to this day, there is no mention whatsoever at all about any kind of ethical sourcing of ingredients. If you're thinking, oh, it's a mistake, or maybe they forgot, I think the chances of this being true are less than 0.001%. You see, MrBeast prides himself on hiring the best of the best, and there is no way marketers would forget to put this kind of information on their website because it would boost their brand favorability in the eyes of consumers. It's likely then that MrBeast is now using child labor and forced labor for Feastables chocolates. This is especially bad because it means that MrBeast and the Feastables team were very aware that child labor and forced labor slavery exists in the chocolate industry, and yet decided to take advantage of the most weak and the vulnerable among us for personal gain. This is a bad look for any company, but it's worse for MrBeast because he puts on these large public displays of being a philanthropist and a role model to young children. Now, my second point is more damning. I think MrBeast knew the entire time, since the beginning of Feastables, that he was going to use child labor and slave labor for his chocolates, but he tried to trick us into thinking otherwise. To try and prove my point, I'm going to first talk about the Feastables packaging, and then I'm going to talk about the kosher and halal certifications. When MrBeast first launched Feastables, it was in line with his brand. They were clearly trying to do things ethically. They actually got a certification from the Rainforest Alliance. The Rainforest Alliance has major issues, but they push for protecting and improving forests, climate, human rights, and livelihood. Once you're certified, you're able to use their logo, which is a little frog, on all of your products, your website, on all of that stuff. When I saw the packaging for Feastables, both old and new, there was no Rainforest Alliance certified logo anywhere. Now, why would these brilliant marketers choose to leave that off when that would, again, boost your brand favorability in the eyes of consumers? The only conclusion that I can think of is that MrBeast knew. He knew that one day they were going to get rid of that certification. You see, if one day that package has a frog logo on it and the next day it disappears, people will notice. They will especially notice because the Feastables bar, MrBeast sent this thing to everyone, to all the huge YouTubers. He ran competitions, he got people to take selfies with it, take pictures on the shelves. This thing has a paper trail 10,000 miles long. And again, if one day it had that frog and the next day it was missing, people were gonna notice. So instead, they decided to only put it on their website because at the end of the day, who the hell reads a website except for weirdos like me? And if it was on the website one day and then gone the next, no one would notice except for, again, weirdos like me. And sure enough, if you look at their website today, there's nothing about the Rainforest Alliance certification, nothing about being child labor free, nothing about being slave labor free. By doing it this way, I think they tried to fool everyone into thinking that their chocolate is still child labor free and slave labor free. At the very beginning of their launch, they kind of made a big deal about it, not enough, not a huge holler so that it was integral to their brand, but just enough so that if you Google Feastables child labor, all the articles are from their initial launch and they talk about how it is those things, but now it's nowhere to be found and nobody has noticed. As a matter of fact, if you go to slaveryfreechocolates.org, which is a website that promotes various chocolate brands that are ethically sourced, Feastables remains on that list despite no longer meeting the requirements to be on that list. As far as I can tell, not a single person or website has picked up on this change, which is why I'm making this video. The second reason why I think MrBeast knew that he was going to use child labor and slave labor is because of the kosher and halal certifications. This one requires a little bit of stretching, but in June of 2023, Reed Duscher, I don't know how to say his last name, MrBeast's former manager Reed, who is still sitting on the board of Feastables, he did a tour of the MrBeast chocolate factory in Peru. And that video isn't all that important except for the very end, where he thanks Machu Picchu Foods for the tour.
Thanks to Machu Picchu Foods for having us. We literally got to see everything from how cocoa is created to how we create MrBeast bars.
This tells us that Machu Picchu Foods is or was the manufacturer for Feastables. Now, Machu Picchu is also Rainforest Alliance certified, they're also kosher certified and halal certified. But here's the thing, Feastables has never, since its very beginning, ever been kosher certified or halal certified. How is that possible when the manufacturer are both of those things? Now, you might be thinking maybe it's because Machu Picchu Foods does some of it and then someone adds stuff to the chocolate later. However, in that video with Reed, they actually show that Machu Picchu Foods, it seems like, takes it from cacao bean all the way to packaged candy. Why is it that the manufacturer says their chocolates are kosher and halal, but Feastables says it isn't? Well, I think this line from Reed has something to do with it.
Pretty wild. We have 4 chocolate lines going and we can't meet demand. So we need way more chocolate lines.
I think MrBeast knew all along that they would have to scale. And when they scaled, they were going to move away from Machu Picchu Foods. That means away from their halal certification, away from the kosher certification, away from the Rainforest Alliance certification. And that's why they chose to omit these things from their packaging. Because if one day it was kosher and halal and the next day it wasn't, then people might start to ask questions as to why. And when they ask questions as to why, they might also discover that, you know what else has been changed? The stuff about child labor free and slave labor free. Why would MrBeast do all this? The simple answer is money. MrBeast has never been shy about telling the world that Feastables was created to fund his videos. And he has also never been shy about complaining about sponsors and how he felt like he wasn't getting paid the adequate amount for sponsors. This is why he created Feastables and why he promotes Feastables in every single video and at every opportunity he gets. But if you're constantly selling out of chocolates, like MrBeast has posted he has multiple times, that means no more money. I think MrBeast knew all along that this was going to happen, so he prepared for it in advance. When he first launched Feastables, he played up just enough. He played up the card of being slave labor free, child labor free, just enough so that people would notice, but not enough that it became integral to his brand. And then slowly, quietly, he activated the plan to move away from those things, to take advantage of the weakest and the most vulnerable among us, hoping no one would notice. But I noticed, and I hope that the whole world notices now. Check out my chair reviews here, or check out this video where people are calling me a time traveler for calling out MrBeast months before all this drama. Until next time, stay honest.